Hi everybody, this is Troy Rulmyr, and I'm here with Freddie Dilworth, and we are addressing the issue of Chris's ride in Robert M. Piercig's Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, specifically the issue of quality. There's several things we're going to talk about, and we're also going to attach this to our blog, so make sure you follow along, and multimedia, isn't it great? How you doing, Freddie?
I'm doing really good.
Okay, so this is your first real ride on a motorcycle as an adult. And there's a couple things we really wanted to address as far as Chris's perspective. One of those, and the first thing we had talked about, was the inability to communicate. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, the only real way to communicate during this is with body language, nodding of the head, following your body. I mean, you told me ahead of time that while we're making the turns, that I need to lean with you to counterbalance the weight and everything. And so you can't tell me during the ride that it's time to lean this way, time to lean that way.
Well, Freddie, you're saying that you can't verbally communicate. Why? Why can't you communicate?
Well, it's just way too loud. You notice with the camera, there's a lot of shaking going on. It's not just because of the bumps in the road. Right here, you see we're passing some huge trucks. Not only we're hearing all their engine sounds, but there's an incredible amount of wind, and it's constant roaring. It's white noise.
Now we have a clip of that, and we're going to play that right here. So. Now that's just an incredible amount of sound, and that's what I heard as the driver, but even more so, like the camera's really picking it up. There's this other issue that you talked about earlier with me, the realization of your own mortality. Let's go into that.
Well, basically, I'm feeling every little bump of that road, and I'm holding on to what you referred to as the sissy bar of the motorcycle. So I felt like if I were to let go of that and hit a bump a little bit too hard, I could have toppled right under that truck, and that would be the end of Freddie as we know it.
Yeah, it's interesting because as the driver, I don't really think about your vulnerability in the back. I'm aware of you as the passenger, and I think that Piercig is kind of the same way. I'm not sure he's really aware of what Chris is doing in the back the whole time, and there is that idea of mortality.
Yeah, it pretty much took until the end of the book for him to realize that Chris only has a view of the back of the head. I mean, I'm fortunate. I'm not 11. I don't need to cling to your back. I had a little bit of a comfortable seat on the back of your bike, so I think it was a lot safer for me than it probably was for him. I had to have this willingness to give up my control to you because I think anyone on the back of a bike really needs to trust the person who's driving them.
Freddie, it's interesting you bring the idea of trust because Chris would have to trust his father, obviously being the driver. The other thing you talked about is mortality, and I think that's a very important issue in Zen. From chapter 23, page 278, it says, "Now Chris motions for me to open the glass door of the vault. I see he wants to talk to me. He wants me to tell him perhaps what death is like." I think subconsciously the narrator knows that Chris is understanding that he is not immortal. And that's an important thing for any young person. This next part of the movie is our first stop in San Pedro, and we called it the Outlook. So take a look real quick.
This was just a really amazing view, and it got me thinking about the thing of mortality. And when somebody realizes their mortality, they can do pretty much two things. They can freak out and have a little bit of a midlife crisis, somewhat of what Piercing is having with this large, this big journey, or they can just try to find some true quality in their life and search for a meaning to whatever it is they want to do with that life.
How does one go about finding quality in their life? I mean, he showed us the Chautauqua, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you find meaning just because you go on a journey.
Yeah, it's the journey itself isn't what gives you the meaning. It's what you do with that journey. If he was just riding his motorcycle around aimlessly, he would be just like his friend John, who was just riding it around for the sake of riding it around. But Piercing has a purpose. He wants to discover things about himself. He wants to, he inadvertently establishes a connection to his son. So, I mean, sometimes these things happen on accident.
I agree. And one thing I've always thought is that the narrator on his journey was being selfish. He only thought about his quality, and he never thought about Chris's quality. And then we kind of saw this sign at the Korean Friendship Bell. Can you explain it?
Well, I thought this was a really great representation of what he finds in the end of his trip. There's the whole unification of the conflicting personalities. You have the father and son conflicting personalities. You even have the narrator and Phaedrus.
Oh, and you also have John, his the narrator's friend.
Exactly, because now you have the conflict of technology and no technology, I guess, with the different types of bikes they use. You can even go as far as to say that a trip like this brings somebody closer to the very world around them. So they don't need to view all these different forces as conflicting, but rather they're complementary to each other. So one enriches the other. But anyways, getting back to the whole thing of Chris's point of view with this thing, I really think that because of this trip that Chris learns from his father that his dad isn't just some old authority figure who's trying to tell him what to do. As his father, he's trying to instill positive values into his son, as well as give him the ability to determine what makes something good, how to determine something's quality.
See, that's interesting you should say, Freddie, because from the get-go on this project, I've really been behind the idea that Chris had a horrible quality, that the narrator completely ignored him. But what it sounds like is you're defending the narrator's search for quality because it's actually enriching Chris's life. Because the narrator is making himself better, therefore he would rub off on Chris.
It doesn't always seem to be that way. He's very fortunate that he was able to influence his son's life like this. In the very end of the book, before Chris tragically meets his end, he showed that the influence of his father really did rub off on him because he bought his own motorcycle. He's trying to find that unification to the rest of the world, that connection to everything, by finding freedom on the road on a motorcycle.
So what you're saying is his quality may not have necessarily been high. The quality of Chris's ride would not be described the same way that the narrator's ride would, but that the narrator did have undue influence on his son.
Exactly, he did. And they definitely would not have the same quality with their rides, because to say that two people would share the exact same quality is to say that they were clones of each other. It's impossible for these people to have the same quality. That's one of the things that they established within this, is that it is a very personal experience to determine quality.
Freddie, you make some great points, and one thing I'm happy is that we got to actually do this because this is something that was really cool. We got a few seconds left. What do you have to say?
This was one of the most amazing and exciting things I've gotten to do in a very long time. I could not stop smiling through this entire ride as soon as I got on the back of the bike. So everyone need to get out there, ride on a motorcycle with somebody who knows what they're doing. Somebody like Troy.
All right, well, thank you guys for watching. We're going to add some more to our blog, and we're going to really make this a good thing. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time.